Of sunny spells and showers, turning cloudy with rain in the north on Saturday. Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to We Need to Talk About on GB News with me, Alex Phillips, where we get stuck into the issues that we should be looking at in depth. Nothing is off the table and nobody will be cancelled for saying what they think. Keeping me company today is Daily Mail columnist Charlie Peters, and here's what we've got coming up on the show. Michael Gove has unveiled the government's Levelling Up plan to transform all parts of the UK by spreading opportunity and prosperity. But do they have any substance? Amid fresh Partygate allegations, Boris Johnson faces renewed calls to resign, with a senior Tory saying he will submit a vote of no confidence today. A police watchdog has found evidence of disgraceful bullying, misogyny, discrimination and sexual harassment within the Met. So is it officers that need policing? That's what we're talking about for the next hour, but what do you need to talk about? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me @gbnews. First of all, it's time for GB News headlines with Rosie. Good afternoon. It's coming up to 2 minutes past 2. I'm Rosie, right here to keep you up to date on GB News. The Prime Minister has been described as a running joke on the international stage. The SNP's leader in Westminster, Ian Blackford, criticised Boris Johnson following fresh allegations that he attended a party in his flat in November 2020 during lockdown. He told the Commons if the Prime Minister's questioned by the police, he must resign.
He lives in a world where he thinks everything is owed to him, and he never pauses to think what he owes to the public.
Don't you, Prime Minister?
The Prime Minister is now a dangerous distraction at home and a running joke on the international stage.
Meanwhile, the Labour Party have accused Boris Johnson of introducing stealth taxes and gaslighting the British public. During Prime Minister's questions, Sir Keir Starmer compared the Prime Minister and the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, to Thelma and Louise, saying they were driving the country off a financial cliff. The Prime Minister, though, says the Conservatives have lifted the living wage and helped an extra 500,000 people off welfare and into work.
Lots of words, lots of bluster, no answers. Word of warning. Word of warning, Prime Minister. That's not going to work with the police. I'll tell him why they're putting taxes up. Low growth. In the decade of Tory government before the pandemic, growth slumped. It was much, much weaker than under the last Labour government.
I think everybody in this country can see that we've been through the biggest pandemic since for 100 years, that we've looked after the people of this country to the tune of £400 billion, that we've put into furlough and all the other schemes, 11.7 million people protected. Everybody knows the cost of that, Mr. Speaker. And at the same time, in spite of all the difficulties that we have faced, we have now got the fastest growth in the G7.
The Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove is due to present the government's plans to level up the country. The policy, which aims to reduce the gap between poor and rich areas, includes 12 national missions, such as improving pay and investing in education. Labour's criticised the plan, accusing the Tories of using recycled pots of money. In other news now, a man who murdered his ex-partner and her autistic child has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 40 years. Daniel Bolton was arrested following a 24-hour manhunt after Bethany Vincent and her 9-year-old son, Darren Henson, was stabbed to death at their home in Lincolnshire last May. The judge described Bolton as violent and ruthless and said he had a hatred motivated by Darren's autism. Manchester United footballer Mason Greenwood has been released on bail pending further investigation. The 20-year-old was first arrested on Sunday on suspicion of rape and assault of a young woman after social media images and videos were posted online. On Tuesday, he was further arrested on suspicion of sexual assault and threats to kill. Raith Rovers Football Club has been warned that its reputation is being tarnished by the signing of a player who was found to have raped a woman by a civil court. The club's main sponsor, author Val McDermid, has withdrawn her support following David Goodwilly's signing. In 2017, he was ordered to pay damages by a civil court, but he's never faced criminal charges. Raith Rovers says the decision to sign him is based purely on football. The Home Secretary says there's been a failure of leadership in some parts of the Metropolitan Police. Priti Patel was speaking after the Independent Office for Police Conduct found evidence of bullying, racism and misogyny in the force. She told the Home Affairs Committee there are problems within the culture of the Met.
We're not seeing one-off incidences. I think we should just be quite clear about that. We are not seeing one-off incidences. It's not isolated. We have seen now too many times, too many instances where in policing we just see the most appalling behaviours, the most appalling conduct. I also think it shows a failure of leadership in some quarters.
The Duchess of Cambridge says she's thrilled to become patron of the Rugby Football Union and Rugby Football League. She's the first member of the royal family to take over one of Prince Harry's former roles. Kensington Palace says the appointment is due to her long-standing passion for sport. Kate's affiliation with English rugby now puts her, though, in direct competition with her husband, who's patron of the Welsh Rugby Union. You are up to date now here on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now, back to Alex and We Need to Talk About. Levelling up. Boris's buzz phrase. Government after government have allowed huge portions of the country to just slip into oblivion. Livelihoods destroyed by unchecked immigration. Industries mothballed through globalisation as chancellors flogged our assets to China. The brutal austerity of George Osborne ripping through the poorest communities alongside a chronic lack of investment in areas that, frankly, didn't matter until they became key election battlegrounds. Today, as the Conservatives promise to close the wealth gap and look after the left-behind voters who backed Brexit, are these jolly sound bites for just about managings, or finally, a genuine commitment to serve the many, not the few? With some of the greatest inequalities in the developed world, have the wonks of Westminster even seen a boarded-up shop or been in a job centre? Tax hikes, soaring gas bills and cuts to welfare make a pretty stark backdrop to government plans to drive investment into some of the UK's most deprived areas. Will they have any impact at all? Well, let's get the headlines from the government's Levelling Up white paper. Here are some of the key details. The government promises investment in the private sector and research and development outside of the South East will increase by at least 40%. There is a promise for improved transport services, simpler fares and integrated ticketing. There's a pledge to increase home ownership and improve the quality of rented homes. And a promise that devolution will be offered to regions that want it. Well, let's talk to Jonathan Warren, who's the chief executive of Localis, a think tank which seeks to find local solutions to the challenges of globalisation. Jonathan, this is very much your remit. So what do you make of the government's Levelling Up plans? Do you think they've got cut through? Will this work? That was not Jonathan Warren. Let's see if we can get Jonathan Warren from Localis. Jonathan, are you there?
I'm here.
There's Jonathan Warren. Okay? Hello there. Nice to have you on. Now, your Localis, the remit is very much looking at local solutions to the challenges of globalisation, which is very much in line broadly with what the government say they're trying to do. So looking at the detail of this white paper, does it have cut through? Will it work?
Well, there's a lot of detail to cut through. 350 pages of report, 50 pages of appendices. This is a very well considered, extremely thoughtful attempt to address the chronic lack of a balanced economic geography, with some areas that do worse, continually not getting investment. It deserves to work. Whether it gets a chance to work is whether it's given the long-term impetus. You can't do this over a short electoral or political cycle. This is a task of decades to get the worst parts of the countries with lower life expectancies, lower educational expectations and attainment, up to the best. So essentially, will it survive post Boris Johnson? Will his successor keep it going? Will it survive a change of political fortunes? This is what we're up against here.
I mean, the government is now facing a cost of living crisis. Perhaps some of that is beyond their control, such as soaring gas prices, though arguably decades of naive energy policy has certainly contributed to that. It's going to be very difficult, surely, to convince the Red Wall voters, those who are probably living in constituencies that traditionally voted Labour, that are used to economic deprivation. It's going to be very difficult to convince them over coming months and years that this government's got a solution when gas bills are going to go up by about £1,000 a year, when welfare's being cut.
Yeah, but there's not a lot of time to play with, in all honesty, before let's say the next election is 2024. What can Michael Gove and colleagues conjure up from a very detailed, very wonkish piece of Whitehall and Westminster research to change that people are going to see differences, improvements to their daily lives, either better skills, better jobs, less crime? There's not a lot of time to do this. What I'd argue is the most immediate thing people see is the state of their local town centre or high street. And then the chances, if they can win the next election, then they might have a chance to push it through over the next political cycle. But it's who knows the way things are going at the moment.
Yeah, very challenging times indeed. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us. Well, we can now be joined by politics and international relations professor at the University of Kent's Matthew Goodwin. Matthew, you were the person who really identified this demographic of the left behind, who backed Brexit and went on to back Boris, who the government are now striving to keep on side. Can you sort of briefly explain who they are and what actually happens to create the disparities the government say they're now so keen to heal?
Well, good afternoon, Alex. It's nice to be with you again. Who are they? Mainly working class, lower middle class, self-employed, people who live well outside of the big cities and university towns, who have basically been on the wrong side of all of the changes that have swept through this country over the last 30 years, who have been left to deal with the sharpest regional inequalities in the entire developed world. Unlike our European neighbours, Alex, we've really just done a very bad job at developing good, strong, mid-level or lower mid-level cities, which means that basically if you're not in London, Oxford or Cambridge, life has not really been great. So I think the Levelling Up white paper, all of the work that's going on in Whitehall at the moment to try and rebalance that economy, even if it isn't completely accurate, completely the right diagnosis, I still think actually it should be welcomed, because that's ultimately what this Brexit vote, what the realignment of politics, what the rise of Boris Johnson and so on, what really partly that was all about, was rebalancing the scales.
And do you think that this white paper is going to reach the areas that it really needs to reach? Because surely people in these constituencies, they basically just want good jobs that pay a decent salary, the ability to go on holiday and buy the foods they want in the supermarket, to keep their children clothed and shod. Is it about bus stations, and is it about gigafactories, or is it about something far more nuanced than that this white paper isn't going to address?
So I think if you look at what the government's trying to do, you've got these 12 missions that the government is outlining, and they include everything from life expectancy to people's sense of well-being, to their sense of pride in local communities, to educational outcomes. So these are all very sort of useful, objective measures of how people are performing, if you like, relative to their counterparts in other parts of the country. Now, if you were being critical, you could say, well, there's not a lot in here about things like family breakdown. There's not a lot in here about things like community engagement. There's not a lot in here about levelling up the voice of these communities in politics, in media, in other institutions that are mainly dominated by usually middle-class graduates. So there's a lot that hasn't been included. But, the flip side of that, Alex, is if you think that levelling up needs to be transformed from an empty slogan into something that we can measure, that you and I can have a conversation about over the next 3 or 4 years and say, actually, have these areas materially improved? Well, then the government has just laid out what those indicators are, and they'll allow people like me and other researchers and think tankers to actually hold the government to account on whether people are really getting levelled up.
I mean, a big part of the Brexit vote were people looking at their particular businesses and industries and saying that, perhaps as well as a result of globalisation, wages were being driven down, the job opportunities weren't there. And has there also been, over the past few decades, almost financial and intellectual flight from some of these deprived areas where, frankly, if you wanted a good and well-paid job, you couldn't get it where you were born and brought up?
Yeah, so about a third of the country's graduates will end up working and living in London, Manchester, or Birmingham. So we get that sort of brain drain that kicks in. And, one of the difficult points here that I think we need to all be honest about as a country is that we can't turn everywhere into London, Oxford or Cambridge, nor should we want to. Lots of areas are proudly different from those areas, and they wouldn't want to look like those areas. And so when we think about levelling up and we think about, well, what is it that will improve people's life opportunities or experiences in these areas, I think actually we're going to need different things for different places. I was struck by Red Wall MP last week, who put a video on YouTube showing just how difficult it was to get across her constituency by bus. For a family of 4, it was £17. It took over 2 hours. Stuff like that actually does matter, because it erodes a family, it erodes community, it means people can't socialise, they can't meet up. But that's very different from, say, boosting the quality of universities, vocational training, internet connectivity that might be much more relevant in other parts of the country. So I think we inevitably need a tailored approach. And just lastly, Alex, that's why devolution is so important. We should be sending power down, not hoarding power at the centre. And if Brexit was about anything, it was really about that sense among people that they don't want power to be floating above them in some distant place. They want power brought down to their daily lives, where people who know their communities can actually help those communities in a more influential way.
Matthew, it's been fantastic having you on the programme today. It's Matthew Goodwin, who is a politics and international relations professor, arguably the man who trained the government's eyes on the disparity. I'm going to now go to our studio guest, Charlie Peters. We are also expecting Michael Gove, who is the Secretary of State for Levelling Up, to address Parliament on that white paper soon. So we'll cross to Parliament as soon as he does stand up. But Charlie, I mean, there is a big crisis here, isn't there, frankly? And it's only going to worsen over the next few months with things like rising rising energy bills. We've also had a distinct lack of social mobility in recent generations with the closure of grammar schools, arguably. Do you think this government have the resources and the wherewithal that they need to actually once and for all tackle this regional disparity?
Well, I think they'll have to. Whether or not they have the capacity or the economic strength to do so, if they don't, they're absolutely toast. I mean, Matthew and Jonathan have spoken very well just now about the economic reasons why this has to be done. Regional inequality is huge, and this costs us not only at home, but also on the regional international stage. We are poorer than our European and global counterparts when we have all of our wealth concentrated in just one city, one region. But it's beyond that. It also matters enormously for the political situation. I mean, so many people from these areas in the country outside of the southeast lent their support to the Conservatives in 2019, and so far haven't seen an awful lot for it.
There is one challenge, isn't there, facing the government, which is Boris Johnson's commitment to the COP agenda and his green agenda, which will put a massive burden on the everyday household when it comes to things like ripping out gas boilers or getting electric cars or added taxes on fuel bills. I mean, he can't have it both ways, surely.
I think you're absolutely right. It's very difficult to be in favour of levelling up and reducing the wealth gap while also requiring self-employed, ordinary working people to install a heat pump in their back garden, possibly costing up to tens of thousands of pounds for all the damage that might cause. An easier way, I think, of achieving both the levelling up agenda and this green agenda, which Boris is keen on, is just improve rail transport. Transport is one of the most significant areas where there is a huge amount of regional inequality. By boosting rail, that would reduce the reliance on cars. People can reduce their carbon footprint and also ease the burden on their wallet.
What's the previous government's mistake in really backing HS2? I mean, that is a problem, isn't it? Because a lot of money is being funneled into just one rail line, and there's been huge U-turns on that at a great expense to the taxpayer, when actually it's improving rail lines across the entirety of the UK. We heard today in Prime Minister's questions about Dorset being cut off from the main line. We then also heard Boris Johnson take issue with some of the policies being put in place by Andy Burnham in Manchester when it comes to transport and clean air policies. There's a whole network of complexity that he's got to navigate here, both with the green agenda and if we're going to bring in this aspect of devolution. The control's been taken out of his hands.
Yeah, to some degree. I mean, I'm pro-HS2, I'm pro-HS3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We need more high-speed rail around the country. And I don't think it's a case of choose one or choose the other. I think it's perfectly possible to have high-speed rail connecting Edinburgh to London and throughout the country, and also have plenty of good regional rail links too. Devolution, in terms of levelling up, definitely very much a good thing. Boris Johnson doesn't know what it's like to live in Hartlepool. But the people of Hartlepool do, their elected representatives do. They know the problems of their area better than anyone in Westminster ever will.
Charlie, thank you so much. We are going to now jump to a short break. When we come back, we'll be continuing this topic and potentially crossing to Parliament to see what the Secretary of State for Levelling Up has to say about his white paper.
Hello again. There will be some bright spells, even some sunshine, mainly to the east of higher ground, but most places are cloudy today, and it will be damp in the northwest, western Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest England. Because a warm front is moving through, it's pushing northeast, and within this warm front, areas of cloud and rain arrive from the Atlantic, but also relatively mild air coming in from the west. Having said that, it is fairly chilly for the Northern Isles ahead of the warm front, and there'll be a few showers at first here before more persistent rain and drizzle arrives later, and it stays damp for western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, as well as northwest England and North Wales, particularly over higher ground. But there will be cloud breaks to the east of Wales, across southeast England and eastern England, and where we get some cloud breaks, 13 or even 14 Celsius is possible, so really quite mild for the time of year. And then this cloudy and damp zone spreads across the whole of the country overnight. So the cloud breaks tending to fill in somewhat, and because of the cloud and an increased breeze, well, it's going to be frost-free for everyone. Temperatures most places staying up at 7 or 8 Celsius. A mild start then to Thursday, but a dull and dreary start for many. Some persistent rain around western hills and coasts. But again, some cloud breaks will develop, especially for the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast, and feeling pleasant enough where that happens. But the breeze will pick up through the day. Gales in the north and west of Scotland, and some heavy rain arriving here later as temperatures drop away significantly behind this area of rain. This is a cold front, and it's going to spread its way southeastwards on Thursday night. Snow above 300 metres for Scotland as the cold front pushes through, and also for the Pennines. and some really quite lively winds associated with it, so gales around coasts and hills. Once that front clears through, colder air for Friday, mixture of sunny spells and showers, turning cloudy with rain in the north on Saturday.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Well, the big story of the day is the government's white paper on levelling up. And while we wait for the Secretary of State for Levelling Up, Michael Gove, to address the Houses of Parliament with the government proposals, we can instead cross live to our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, who joins us on College Green. We're waiting for Tom to connect to us, so give us one moment. Let's just see if we can dig him out. There he is. We've got him. Tom, so it's a big announcement for the government today. This is all about pleasing and appeasing those red wall voters who backed Brexit and backed Boris by actually getting rid of some of the big disparities in the UK's regions. Can you tell us a little bit more about the government's plans?
Absolutely. This is the defining mission of this government, and it's a tricky thing. Well, it has been a tricky thing to define over the last 2 years. Of course, this government got in with its 80-seat majority in December 2019, and within 2 months, Brexit got done, and then we were whacked with a massive, great pandemic. Well, there's also been sort of stuttering government since then. There's been the question about what is this government for? What's it going to use its majority for? How is the country going to change? Today's white paper attempts to answer that question. The phrase levelling up, which has meant so many different things to so many different people since it entered our political lexicon 2 years ago, is finally getting some meat on the bone. The way in which this extra cash will be delivered to regions, particularly the structure through which it will be decided. So greater devolution of power, the successful mayoral model that we've seen in places like Manchester, like the West Midlands, like the Tees Valley, like London, these sort of powerful mayors that we've come to know so many of them by name, Andy Burnham, Andy Street, Sadiq Khan, Ben Houchen. Having more of those, having a mayor for every area that wants one, someone that can then direct the funding to the area in the way that they know best. What bits of their patch need that levelling up? But it's not just about funding, of course. It's about attitude. It's about civic pride. These are all the things that the white paper is attempting to address. Although, I have to stress, we haven't seen the full detail yet. The almost 400-page tome has not been published, but it will be published as soon as Michael Gove gets to his feet this afternoon in the House of Commons.
Now, Tom, I mean, there's still Partygate is still beleaguering the Prime Minister with more revelations of potential leaked photographs and accusations that he himself attended supposed bashes in his own apartment. Can you talk to us about that as well?
Well, the Prime Minister is under fire, having been accused of attending a party in the number 10 flat the night that Dominic Cummings graciously left number 10 holding that box of items. I think we've all seen that famous photograph of him walking out the front door, making, some would say, a bit of a show of the whole affair. Well, allegedly there was a party that night in the flat hosted by Carrie Johnson, the Prime Minister's wife, playing ABBA songs, celebrating the supposed victory of a power struggle between the acolytes of Carrie Johnson and the acolytes of Dominic Cummings. Of course, a number of people around the Cummings sphere, that Vote Leave group within government, left in the previous month or two of that time. People like Lee Kane, Oliver Lewis and, of course, Dominic Cummings himself. Those Vote Leave figures leaving number 10 and a circle around Carrie Johnson entering number 10. It was seen as a power struggle. There's alleged to have been a party in the number 10 flat that night. Although, I have to say, sitting up in the press gallery during Prime Minister's questions today, it did feel like we had sort of moved on from Partygate. There were real substantive issues. It felt like the first almost normal Prime Minister's questions that we've seen since the start of the year, really. Many questions on various different aspects of life, things that affect ordinary people, rather than just the machinations of Westminster. So potentially this was a day where a Prime Minister returning from a successful international visit, where he was making a mark on the world stage, of course, meeting the President of Ukraine yesterday, coming back to the UK today, standing at that dispatch box, talking about bread and butter issues, but also about, of course, the international scene, appearing as someone who was trying to put the last torrid month and a bit behind him. And to some extent, I think his backbenchers as a whole bought into that. There were the shouts of more from those backbenchers when he was having a little peroration against Keir Starmer there. There was the sort of nature of Prime Minister's questions that we've come to know seemed to return to the House of Commons today.
Tom, thank you ever so much. Well, let's keep on the pulse of these big political stories today and talk to Ben Harris-Quinney, who is chairman of the Bow Group, which is a Conservative think tank. Now, David Davis, Theresa May, Andrew Mitchell, these are pretty big names asking for Boris to quit. Now, the Defence Committee chairman, Tobias Ellwood, has called for him to go on the day he's due to get on the blower with Putin. This headache is simply not going away for Boris, is it?
Yeah, and I think what is notable about it is that these resignations or no confidence announcements are coming from the left and the right of the party alike. Ellwood is quite closely affiliated with Tugendhat. We also had Charles Walker come out in the last few days and say that he felt the Prime Minister should consider his position as well. And likewise, as you say, you've got a figure like David Davis, prominent Brexiteer, and Theresa May as well. So there doesn't seem to be sort of any coherence in terms of where it's coming from a political point of view. And it really does genuinely seem to be about the anger over the issue, and obviously the anger that constituents are feeding back to their MPs, which, frankly, there have been a number of MPs that come out and say, oh, I've never heard anything about this in my constituency. But I do find that very difficult to believe. And I think it's an issue that continues to rankle with the public, not only because of what has happened, but also the way it's been handled and the cover-up and everything that's gone on since.
Now, Ben, as we're waiting for Michael Gove to address Parliament on the Levelling Up White Paper, let's talk about that. Do you think that Gove has it in him to really get rid of these disparities we've got in UK regions by putting forward an agenda when the government is simultaneously plugging a big green agenda and when there's this massive mounting cost of living crisis that's about to take hold of the country in a matter of months?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is no, and it's not really Michael Gove's fault because the scale of the problem is so vast. My belief is that the real rate of inflation is actually over 10%. And so in order even to to keep people's wages in the north, but in the country generally growing at that level, you've got to really go some. And 4.8 billion is a lot of money, but we've just given $1 billion to Ukraine. And if you look at the kind of money that Germany had to spend in rebalancing the East with the West, that was about 70 billion a year that they invest in that and have continued to invest in that. So I think that will be a real struggle. The other point is that, as you say, the green agenda, net zero, I don't think the public truly understand the costs of this, what it's going to do to public finances, but also what it's going to do to their own finances and living standards. McKinsey, the consultancy firm, came out with a report a few weeks ago to say that the global cost of government expenditure on net zero would be 275 trillion. That's just capital expenditure. That's not what it will cost the economy.
It's going to be a huge difference. Ben, I'm going to have to interject. We've run out of time on our interview, but thank you so much for coming on the programme. That's Ben Harris-Quinney from the Bow Group. It's time now for Check on the News headlines with Rosie.
Good afternoon, it's 2:34. I'm Rosie Wright here to keep you up to date on GB News. The Prime Minister has been described as a running joke on the international stage. The SNP's leader in Westminster, Ian Blackford, criticised Boris Johnson following fresh allegations that he attended a party in his flat in November 2020 during lockdown. He told the Commons if the Prime Minister's questioned by the police, he must resign. Meanwhile, the Labour Party have accused Boris Johnson of introducing stealth taxes and gaslighting the British public. During Prime Minister's questions, Sir Keir Starmer compared the Prime Minister and the Chancellor Rishi Sunak to Thelma and Louise, saying they were driving the country off a financial cliff. The Prime Minister, though, says the Conservatives have lifted the living wage and helped an extra 500,000 people off welfare and into work. The Levelling Up Secretary, Michael Gove, is due to present the government's plans to level up the country, with the aim of reducing the gap between poor and rich areas. Labour's criticised the policy, accusing the Conservatives of using recycled pots of money. In other news now, a man who murdered his ex-partner and her autistic child has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 40 years. Daniel Bolton was arrested following a 24-hour manhunt after Bethany Vincent and her 9-year-old son, Darren Henson, were stabbed to death at their home in Lincolnshire last May. The Home Secretary says there's been a failure of leadership in some parts of the Metropolitan Police. Priti Patel was speaking after the Independent Office for Police Conduct found evidence of bullying, racism and misogyny in the force. She told the Home Affairs Committee there are problems within the culture of the Met. You're now up to date on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. We'll keep you up to date across the afternoon. A short break now, then back to Alex and We Need to Talk About.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. Well, while we're still waiting for the Secretary of State for Levelling Up, Michael Gove, to address Parliament on the government's major white paper today, let's have a talk about what's really going on in Ukraine. We've been told for weeks now that Putin is poised to invade, but how much of that is true? Is this, as Russia is now claiming, actually a clever play by the West, having realised they got themselves into a right old pickle over power imbalances through short-termist energy policies that frankly allowed Putin to collect some pretty cool trump cards? We basically did nothing when he casually took over Crimea. We turned our backs when a passenger plane was shot out of the sky. We watched Putin's agents poison people on our own soil, and we all allowed never to be criticised Mutter Merkel to put Europe in a position where Russia can blackmail an entire continent with gas prices while playing immigration games with his little patsy in Belarus. Maybe, just maybe, the West realised a little bit late in the game that Putin is winning. And these mounting tensions are actually an illusion designed to justify a long overdue smackdown. Well, joining me now is Emil Filtenborg, live from Ukraine. Emil, how is the media portraying what's going on over in Ukraine? Do they think that there is the threat of an imminent invasion, or are they sort of beginning to discuss whether this is a power play by America?
I mean, there are as many opinions in media as there are in the real world, so to speak. They have all sorts of views. I think a lot of the Ukrainian media is starting to take this as a more serious threat, but they also question, a lot of them question how the West has responded to this problem. So I'd say that it's an answer that has to contain multitudes, because they have all the opinions and all the
All the various... I mean, is there a sense of mounting tensions among the people in Ukraine? Are they sort of preparing themselves for potentially imminent invasion, or is it life as normal?
Well, in eastern Ukraine, where I am right now, I'm on the northern side of the front line. Many people do not prepare at all for this. We hear from school directors that they do not prepare. We hear that the hospitals are not prepared for any invasion. While in Kiev, we've seen that people have been preparing and packing their go bags in case they need to run. They have been repainting the signs for the bunkers and such. So it's really a geographical tendency where in the East people are not talking as much about this threat of an imminent invasion and are not preparing for it, while in Kiev it's a very, very hot topic.
And what are sentiments like in the country in general? Is there a lot of support for British and American foreign policy, which seems to have suddenly jumped into activity in 2022, considering there have been tensions in the Donbass and Russian incursions on Ukrainian territory for quite a while now? Are they in favour of the West's intervention at the moment?
Well, they're very, very happy about, especially the support they have been receiving from Great Britain. But the long-standing issue, the issue they've been having for years now, is that they have never been let into to NATO, and this is, of course, what they think is the overarching problem they have now. That this would never have been a threat had they been a member of NATO. But what we're seeing right now with the shipments of money and of weapons from the US and Great Britain, especially, is very popular among the Ukrainians.
I mean, there has been today in El País, a Spanish newspaper, an alleged leaked NATO document, which appears to suggest that some concessions have been offered by America and by NATO to Russia, including a promise that there'll be no missiles in Ukraine. But it seems to me that there's now a reciprocal ramping up of tensions, that we are all the while sending through armaments and troops to train other troops, threatening sanctions, while Russia is continuing to amass troops. How on earth can this situation be de-escalated?
if I was smart enough to answer that question, I don't think I would be a freelance journalist in Eastern Ukraine. I think it's very, very hard to solve this crisis, and it seems like, as many commentators has pointed out, that Putin has been boxed in now, because when he started amassing these troops back in the winter last year, US was extremely fast at saying now Russia is planning an invasion of Ukraine, or now there's an imminent threat of attack, which really doesn't give him many ways out of this situation. And we keep piling on the pressure. He keeps piling on the pressure. And for me right now, and I'm not an expert, it seems very hard for me to see a realistic diplomatic solution to this problem. I'm not saying that it's definitely going to happen, that he is going to invade. I do still believe there's hope that some diplomatic way can be found out, like some diplomatic way can be found out of this. But, well, when you're looking at it, taking it at face value right now, it looks like it's only going in one direction.
Yeah, Emil, thank you so much for joining us once again live from Ukraine in the heart of the action. Emil Filtenberg is a freelance reporter currently based in the northeast of Ukraine. Well, I'm going to bring my studio guest, Charlie Peters, who's a Mail Plus columnist, into this discussion. Charlie, what are your thoughts? Something about this just doesn't add up to me, and I can't put my finger on what it is, but we know that Putin has been operating... Oh, hold on, we're going to stop there. Rather than talking about Ukraine, believe it or not, we're going to go live to the House of Parliament, where Secretary of State for Levelling Up, Michael Gove, is about to address Parliament about the government's white paper.
Long COVID years, we need to get this country moving at top speed again. We need faster growth, quicker public services and higher wages. And we need to allow overlooked and undervalued communities to take back control of their destiny. Because we know that while talent is spread equally across the United Kingdom, opportunity is not. Our country is an unparalleled success story, but not everyone shares in it. The further you are from one of our great capitals, whether it's London, Edinburgh, Cardiff or Belfast, the tougher life can be. For every local success, there is a story of scarring and stagnation elsewhere. And that's got to change. We need to tackle and reverse the inequality that is limiting so many horizons, and which also harms our economy. The gap between much of the South East and the rest of the country, in productivity, in health outcomes, in wages, in school results, and in job opportunities, must be closed. And this isn't about slowing down London or the South East. It's not about dampening down animal spirits. It's rather about turbocharging the potential of every part of the UK. And this country won't achieve its full potential until every individual and community achieves everything of which they're capable. Our economy has been like a jet propelled by only one engine. Now we need to fire up every resource we have. And the economic prize from levelling up is potentially enormous. If underperforming places were levelled up towards the UK average, unlocking their full potential, it could boost aggregate UK GDP by tens of billions of pounds each year. So how do we achieve success? Firstly, by backing business. The economic growth we want to see across the UK will be generated by the private sector, by businesses and entrepreneurs, investing, innovating, taking risks and opening new markets. And we'll support them every step of the way by cutting through the red tape, making it easier to secure investment, and, as our white paper today outlines, by creating the right environment on the ground for business. As the Chancellor laid out in our plan for growth, we need to invest in science and innovation, improve infrastructure and connectivity, and extend educational opportunity to underpin economic success. And this white paper makes clear our commitment to improving education, investment and connectivity fastest in those parts of the country which have not had the support that they needed in the past. We've set out clear, ambitious missions, underpinned by metrics by which we can be held to account to drive the change we need. So in productivity, science and innovation, Mission 1, by 2030, we pledge that pay, employment and productivity will have risen in every area of the UK, with each containing a globally competitive city, closing the gap between top performing areas and the rest. Mission 2 will see a massive increase in domestic public investment in research and development outside the Greater South East, increasing by at least a third in the next 3 years, and will use this shift in resources to leverage private sector investment in the areas that need it most. On infrastructure and connectivity, we'll have better local transport, bringing the rest of the country closer to the standards of London's transport system. And we'll also improve digital connectivity, with billions of pounds of investment bringing nationwide gigabit-capable broadband and 4G coverage to the whole UK, and will expand 5G coverage to the overwhelming majority of the population. On education and skills, we will effectively eradicate illiteracy and innumeracy with investment in the most underperforming areas of the country. 55 new education investment areas in England alone, driving school improvement in the local authorities where attainment is weakest. And our sixth mission, new high-quality skills training, targeted at the lowest skilled areas, with 200,000 more people completing high-quality skills training annually. Now, we know that to achieve these missions, we will need smart, targeted government investment. And that's why we're investing more than £20 billion in research and development to create a science and technology superpower. And today we're allocating £100 million specifically to 3 new innovation accelerators in the West Midlands, Glasgow and Greater Manchester. It's also why we're investing £5 billion in bus services and active travel, with new bus investment today in all our mayoral combined authorities and the green light for bus projects in Stoke-on-Trent, Derbyshire, Warrington and across the country. It's also why we're investing in new academies, new free schools and new institutes of technology. And today we're establishing a new digital UK National Academy. Just as the UK established the Open University to bring higher education to everyone, we are making available to every school student in the country high-quality online teaching, so geography is no barrier to opportunity. And we'll also use the freedoms that we now have outside the EU to reform government procurement rules to ensure that the money that we spend on goods and services is spent on British firms and British jobs. We will unashamedly put British workers first in the global race for investment. Economic opportunity spread more equally across the country is at the heart of levelling up, but it's also about community as well. It's about repairing the social fabric of our broken heartlands so they can reflect the pride we feel in the places we love. That's why we're investing in 20 new urban regeneration projects, starting in Wolverhampton and Sheffield and spreading across the Midlands and the North. £1.8 billion invested in new housing infrastructure, turning brownfield land into projects across the country, like Stratford and King's Cross in London. And by regenerating the great cities and towns of the North, we can relieve the pressure on greenfields and public services in the South. A more productive, even prouder and faster growing North helps improve quality of life and well-being in the South. And that's why we're refocusing housing investment towards the North and Midlands. And our housing mission is clear. We will give renters a secure path to greater home ownership. We will drive an increase in first-time buyers, and we will deliver a tough focus on decent standards in rented homes. A new £1.5 billion Levelling Up Home Building Fund will give loans to small and medium-sized builders to deliver new homes, the vast majority of which will be outside London and the South East. And our housing plans will set a decent minimum standard that all rented properties must meet. Our white paper this spring will include plans to cut the number of poor-quality rented homes by half. It will also address the injustice of no-fault evictions and bear down on rogue landlords, improving the life chances of children and families up and down the country. We will also take action in law to tackle the problem of empty properties and vacant shops on our high streets. Building on the work of my honourable friend, the member for Stoke-on-Trent North, we will ensure that properties cannot remain unloved and unused for months, dragging down the whole high street. Instead, we will put every property to work for the benefit of the whole community. Central also to improving the quality of life for all will be further investment in sport, culture, nature and young people. That's why we're investing £230 million extra in grassroots football and using the Community Ownership Fund to help fans take back control of clubs such as Bury FC. It's also why every extra penny of Arts Council spending will now be allocated outside London, from celebrating ceramics in Stoke to supporting pride in British history in Bishop Auckland. It's also be the case that there will be another £30 million allocated to improving parks and urban green spaces, as well as plans to regreen all of our green belt. We'll also invest an additional £560 million in activities for young people. We'll also invest in reversing health disparities, tackling obesity and improving life expectancy. And we will also ensure that the communities in which we're investing are safer and more orderly. Fighting crime and antisocial behaviour is essential to giving communities new heart. So we'll invest an additional £150 million in our Safer Streets Fund, and we will also ensure that those who drag our communities down through vandalism, graffiti and joyriding pay back their debts to communities. They will be set to work on improving the environment, cleaning up public spaces, clearing away the drug debris in our parks and streets, and contributing to civic renewal. And critical to the success of our mission will also be giving communities not just the resources, but also the powers necessary to take back control. And that is why our White Paper sets out how we will shift more power away from Whitehall to working people. We'll give outstanding local leaders like Andy Street and Ben Houchin new powers. We'll create new mayors, and indeed Dan Jarvis. We'll create new mayors where people want them. We'll give 9 counties, including Derbyshire and Durham, new powers as trailblazers in a programme of county deals, and we'll strengthen the hand of local leaders across the country. We will also take back control of the money that the EU used to spend on our behalf, ensuring that local areas can invest in their priorities through the new UK Shared Prosperity Fund. With power comes responsibility, so we'll also ensure that data on local government performance is published so that we can also hold local leaders to account. Central government will report back to this House on our progress against our missions and the impact that all our policies have on closing geographical inequalities. Because building long-term structures matter, we will also create the institutions, generate the incentives and supply the information necessary to drive levelling up for years ahead. Madam Deputy Speaker, this White Paper lays out a long-term economic and social plan to make opportunity more equal. It shifts power and opportunity towards the North and Midlands, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. It guarantees increased investment in overlooked and undervalued communities, in research and development, in education and skills, in transport and broadband, in urban parks and decent homes, in grassroots sports and local culture, and in fighting crime and tackling antisocial behaviour. It gives local communities the tools to tackle rogue landlords, dilapidated high streets and neglected green spaces. And it demonstrates that this people's government is keeping faith with the working people of this country by allowing them to take back control of their lives, their communities and their futures, and I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Secretary of State Lisa Nandy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. After all the delays, all the slogans, all the big promises, is this it? Is this really it? The sum total of ambition for our proud coastal and industrial towns, our villages and our great cities.
The Secretary of State was heard with respect. I don't expect the Shadow Secretary of State to be shouted at. Lisa Nandy.
Madam Deputy Speaker, they don't disrespect us when they chunter and cheer. They disrespect the people of this country. Seriously, is this it? The sum total of our ambition for our coastal and industrial towns, our villages and our great cities is a history lesson on the rise of the Roman Empire. A minister scurrying around Whitehall, shuffling the deck chairs, cobbling together a shopping list of recycled policies and fiddling the figures. Is this really it? For some of us, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is personal. We've lived these failures every single day. We've watched good jobs go, our high streets boarded up, young people who have to get out to get on. He talks about Bury FC. My stepdad was a lifelong supporter of Bury FC, a regular at Gig Lane. His last words to my stepbrother before he died were, "What's the score?" If he were alive today, he would never forgive them for standing aside while this asset at the centre of Bury's community was allowed to collapse. Madam Deputy Speaker, this system is completely broken and he's given us more of the same. This was meant to be the Prime Minister's defining mission of government. I'm not surprised he was too embarrassed to come here today and to defend it himself. It's so bad that even the Secretary of State has privately been saying that it's rubbish. They tell us to wait till 2030, but where have they been for the last 12 years? And, well, I'll tell them where. In Whitehall, turbocharging the decline of our communities, cutting off choices and chances for a generation of young people. Well, he talks about 12 missions. This is 12 admissions of failure. Let's take one of them. Only 2/3 of children leave primary school with the basic skills to get on. Forgive me if I've missed something, But wasn't he the Education Secretary for 4 years? What about this? They want to tackle crime, but on their watch, fewer than 1 in 10 crimes are solved, and nearly all rapes go unprosecuted. Anyone would think, listening to this, that he wasn't in charge of the Justice Department. This is a government in freefall, out of ideas, out of energy, recycled, watered-down ambitions, and none of it is new. In fact, some of it's so old that one of the better announcements that caught my eye was actually made in 2008 by Gordon Brown, and it's been running ever since. Across our hometowns, we've seen good jobs disappear and far too many young people that have to get out to get on. This does nothing to address that. He talks about a Medici-style renaissance, but can't he see what's happening in front of his eyes? Our high streets are struggling because the local economy is struggling. People don't have money to spend in our shops, our businesses, our high streets, and they're about to hike up their taxes. This does nothing to address it. What we needed was a plan to connect our towns and villages to jobs, to opportunities, to our family and to our friends. But they've halved the funding for buses, they've scrapped the rail promises to the north, and where is the digital Britain we were promised? Madam Deputy Speaker, we don't need to look to Rome, Jericho or Renaissance Florence for inspiration, because in Preston, Wigan and Grimsby, people are delivering real change for themselves, not because of their government, but despite it. That's right. Imagine what we could do if they would get out of the way and give us back the power that we demand to make decisions for ourselves. Well, she laughs. They do laugh. They've been laughing at us for years, and here it goes again. It's absurd that we have to go cap in hand to Westminster to do things that we know will work for us. Don't believe me, believe the former Mayor of London, who in 2013 demanded powers that are nowhere to be seen. In this report, we asked for powers and we got a process. Where are the powers we were promised? Seriously, Madam Deputy Speaker, the arrogance of a Chancellor sitting in Whitehall, drawing lines on a map, choosing which of us have earned the right to have some say over the decisions that affect not their lives, our lives, our families and our communities. He talks about London-style regeneration. My colleagues in London will talk proudly about the London that they call home, but not every part of this country, Secretary of State, wants to be the same. We have our own identities, we're proud of our own places, we believe in our communities, we believe in our people, and we deserve a government that backs us, not this smoke and mirrors that we've been handed today. They have given more to fraudsters than they've given to the north of England. For every £13 they've taken from us, they've given us £1 back. We get a partial refund and they expect us to be grateful. Well, I'll give you an example of this. The Mayor of Greater Manchester today raised broken promises on rail, and he was told by one of their MPs, don't bite the hand that feeds you. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's not their money, it's ours. Imagine what we could achieve if we had a government with an ambition for Britain that matched the ambition of the people in it. We could build good jobs in every community. There's a global race to create these jobs, and we will bring them here so that young people in our coastal and industrial towns can power us through the next generation like their parents and grandparents powered us through the last. In every community in this country, people know we can do so much better than this. Well-paid jobs, money back in people's pockets to genuinely transform our high streets, reform business rates to back our bricks and mortar businesses, buying, making and selling more in Britain, and an education recovery plan that stands as a testament to our commitment to the young people who make this country what it is. That is our mission, Madam Deputy Speaker, and today we've learnt one crucial thing. For all the spin and all the gloss, they won't do it because they don't believe in this country, so we will.
Secretary of State. I think you're preventing the Secretary of State from speaking. I would suggest that a modicum of silence from the backbenchers would be welcome. Secretary of State.
Thank you. I have enormous respect and affection for the Honourable Lady, but end of her response, I don't think I heard a single question, nor did I hear her disagree with a single policy that we put forward. So she is in distinguished company. She joins other Labour colleagues who've welcomed the White Paper. Tracy Brabin, the Mayor of West Yorkshire, who said there's lots to be pleased about in this White Paper. The Mayor of South Yorkshire, who said on Sunday that he warmly welcomed the support that we were giving to Sheffield. And this was a much-needed recognition of the potential of that great city. So I'm glad that she's in good company, good Labour company, and welcoming in this. She mentioned Bury FC, and she suggested that this government had to decide. I'm sorry, but it was this government that provided £1 million to the fans of Bury FC so they could take back control of football. It wasn't Labour Bury Council, it was Tory ministers who saved that football club for its fans. She asks where we've been over the course of the last 12 years. She asks about my time as Education Secretary. Well, my mother said self-praise is no honour, but since she asks, there were more good and outstanding schools as a result of that. We closed the gap between rich and poor. We extended opportunity. We ensured that illiteracy and innumeracy were tackled. Now, she also says we need more good jobs. I completely agree. That's why we've got a plan for growth, and she's got no plan. She says that we need to revive our high streets. I completely agree. That's why we've got a plan for investment, and they've got no plan. She says she wants improved connectivity. That's why we've ensured that gigabit connectivity has gone from 10% to 60% in the last 2 years, and they have no plan. She says that she believes in devolution. Well, we have 9 county deals and powers for mayors. The only devolution in England that Labour ever offered was to London. They did nothing for the North and Midlands when it came to devolution. And she says that she wants safer town centres. Why is it that every time we've brought forward policies for tougher sentences in this House, Labour have voted against? No plans, no idea, no answers. And they also ask about new money. Do they not forget, do they not remember, I should say, what Liam Byrne wrote in 2010? When the last Labour government left, there was no money left. Now, they are so fiscally incompetent that they say they want simultaneously not to have a national insurance increase and to cut other taxes and at the same time to increase public spending. Yes. Our commitment to abolish innumeracy cannot come quickly enough, starting with the Labour front bench. My right honourable friend, the Chancellor, has committed £500 million to tackling adult innumeracy. We know where that funding should go first. If they had their way, borrowing would go up, interest rates would go up, the poorest in the North and Midlands would lose out. Instead of levelling up, they would bring the economy crashing down. That is why we never need to have that front bench in power in this country ever.
A little reminder that the Secretary of State should not refer to honourable members.
That was Secretary of State Michael Gove, laying out the government's levelling up white paper there in front of the House of Commons. We're now going to join Darren McCaffrey and The Briefing for a deeper look into the government's plans.
A very good afternoon. Welcome to the Briefing PM live here on GB News. We are in Burnley this afternoon, focusing, of course, on that levelling up report and all the latest political news and analysis over the next hour between 3 and 4. Not least of all, that within the last couple of minutes, another Conservative MP has handed in his letter to the 1922 committee calling for the Prime Minister to go, wants to see a leadership race. It looked like this story may well have faded, yet there has now been a drip of letters going in to Sir Graham Brady. We'll have the latest on that. Also in the programme, we'll be focusing on levelling up. We've just been listening to Michael Gove and Lisa Nandy in the Commons. We'll be asking, what does it mean for places like this in the northwest of England? Can the government genuinely move wealth from the south to the north? Can they create jobs and improve people's lives in this part of the country? And that is all part of our Northwest Week. As we continue our tour of the Northwest, we were in Macclesfield yesterday, Burnley today, Blackpool tomorrow. And if you live here, please do get in touch, or about any of the political stories today. You know the email address, gbviews at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at gbnews. Very good afternoon and welcome to the programme. Yeah, very good afternoon. Thank you for your company on this Wednesday afternoon. It is 7 minutes past 3 o'clock. Let's just bring you up to date with that news within the last couple of minutes, and that is that Anthony Magno, who is a Conservative MP, has just tweeted